Human suffering is rarely caused by events themselves. It is produced by interpretation. The mind does not wait for reality to unfold. It anticipates, evaluates, labels, and concludes in advance. By the time something actually happens, the meaning has already been assigned. This creates a subtle but constant conflict between what is happening and what the mind believes should be happening. That conflict is experienced as mental fatigue. Most people live inside this process without seeing it. Thought presents itself as observation, but it is not observing. It is interfering. A delay becomes intention. A reaction becomes judgment. A moment becomes identity. The mind converts neutral data into psychological conclusions, and then reacts to those conclusions as if they were facts. This loop repeats continuously, and because it feels familiar, it is mistaken for self. The four agreements do not offer comfort or improvement. They function as a diagnostic tool. Each agreement isolates one core distortion through which the mind generates unnecessary suffering. The first distortion is linguistic identification. Language is not only used to describe experience, it defines the boundaries of identity. Repeated statements such as, "I am careless," "I am not respected," or "this always happens to me," do not report reality. They compress complex situations into fixed labels. Once a label is accepted, perception reorganizes around it. Evidence is selectively noticed. Contradictions are ignored. Over time, the label no longer feels like a thought. It feels like truth. This is not because it is accurate, but because repetition stabilizes belief. To be impeccable with one's word is to interrupt this mechanism. Precision in language prevents premature identity formation. When language becomes exact, perception regains flexibility. The second distortion is personalization. The mind assumes that external reactions are evaluations of the self. This assumption is false, yet persistent. Most human behavior is driven by internal pressure, not external targets. When personalization occurs, the mind converts unrelated reactions into judgments about worth. Emotional regulation is then outsourced to unpredictable variables. This creates instability. Not taking things personally is not emotional withdrawal. It is a recognition that interpretation is optional. When reactions are no longer treated as verdicts, internal equilibrium increases. The third distortion is assumption making. The mind treats uncertainty as a threat to control. In response, it generates narratives. These narratives are not neutral. They are biased toward fear, loss, and rejection. Once generated, the body responds as if the imagined scenario were real. Physiological tension appears. Defensive behavior follows. Relationships deteriorate in response to scenarios that were never confirmed. Assumptions simulate reality well enough to trigger stress, even in the absence of facts. Refusing to assume interrupts this simulation. Without narrative, emotional escalation cannot sustain itself. The fourth distortion is conditional self-acceptance. The mind equates worth with performance. Effort is measured against static expectations, despite constantly changing conditions. This creates chronic self-punishment. When performance fluctuates, identity collapses. Doing one's best does not demand improvement. It removes punishment from effort. When effort is no longer linked to shame, behavior becomes more consistent, not because of motivation, but because resistance decreases. These four agreements do not solve life. They reduce distortion. They do not create happiness. They remove internal interference. What remains is not a better version of self, but a clearer interface with reality. Thought continues. Emotion continues. But identification weakens. When identification weakens, suffering loses its primary mechanism. What remains is clarity. Not comforting, not dramatic, simply accurate.